Hey everyone, Jess here, Prospector's head of new media. We're excited to kick off something new with On the Rocks, our masterclass series. These episodes will bring you deep digs into specific topics with industry experts, all while keeping that casual, drink with a friend style you know and love. And what better way to launch the series than with a fun twist? If you're a regular listener, you know Emily's passion for bourbon often makes an appearance in our episodes. So today, we're joined by John Fitzy Fitzpatrick, one of South Florida's leading spirits experts, for a special masterclass on whiskey. Don't worry, we'll be getting back to mining topics in our upcoming episodes, but we thought this would be the perfect way to introduce the format while celebrating one of the show's signature elements. Fitzy brings over 2 decades of experience in the beverage industry and has become renowned for his engaging whiskey classes. Currently serving as the spiritual advisor at Warren in Delray Beach, he's helped countless people discover and appreciate fine spirits, especially whiskey. So grab your favorite drink and let's hand it over to Emily for the special kickoff to our masterclass series. Enjoy!
Fitzy, thank you so much for joining me today here on The Rocks. We're kicking off our masterclass series with a masterclass with you, which folks I think will be really excited about because they hear me talking about bourbon and whiskey. They hear me chatting about it with our guests on the podcast. And now we've got a no-kidding expert, a spiritual advisor, specifically. So I was really excited to meet you at Warren when I went there and had a great experience with you, kind of learning about bourbon and whiskey, of course, over a great meal first and then over a class. So really excited to have you here.
Thanks. Good to talk. I never don't love talking about whiskey. So and the more people that'll listen, the better. So.
Well, there are a lot of folks in the mining industry that drink it, so I think you're gonna have a good crowd listening to this one.
Do you like that though? My little joke. I don't serve minors.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
I can't serve minors.
Yeah. Well, so what are you drinking today, or what do you want to share?
Okay, I just had lunch with Joe. Was it Tuesday? Mm-hmm. And he dropped me off. He's very generous. He never shows up empty-handed. And he gave me this is the New Year Barrel Crest Spirits. Each year they do a New Year blend. This is the 2025. Like all this stuff, it's a cask strength, so it's a hearty 112.1 proof.
Love it.
I love that he and his team both they do the tenths. Point one.
Oh.
And he's actually has 2 of the barrels that we bought at from Joe at Barrel Craft Spirits are actually hundredths. Like our cognac finish blend is 134.56.
Well, that's what I'm checking because that's what I've got a barrel, one of your private release, the finished in the Malmsey Madeira bottle.
Malmsey, yeah.
And it's signed by Joe from the class that I did with you two. And it's 128.38 proof.
I love that. I'm waiting for someone to do thousands. 120.387.
That's right.
But that's just they get into the nerdy. They really get into like the science of it, and so they like to get into the details. But I love that they do that. Some most blenders, most whiskey makers will just 100 proof or 110 proof. Right. Feels like no, it's 124.37.
Well, we love that in the sciences, of course. We like accuracy.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Appreciate that too. Well, one of the reasons I was really excited to have you on is, I thought it would be great for our listeners to kick off this new season with a deep dive on whiskey, right? And I was wondering, could you kick it off by just telling us, like, what's the biggest misconception that people have about whiskey?
I think, when people sit with me and I do the whiskey tasting experience with them, there's always 1 or 2 in the group that I don't like whiskey. I hate whiskey. And I'll say, well, hate's a strong word first.
Right.
Second, it's usually a product of their having, either they had a really peaty, smoky scotch, or back in college they took a shot of like some high proof, really hot could be rye, something sharp and spicy, and they'll think that that's all whiskey.
Yeah.
Well, I think the biggest misperception is that it's, well, one, that it's kind of like it's it used to be, well, that's your grandpa's bottom shelf hooch, if you will, and it's rough, and it's, you drink whiskey to put air on your chest, and what they don't understand, and so many people that sit with me that are new to whiskey are quite amazed at how refined that, of all the spirits, vodka, gin, rum, whiskey is the most artisanal. It's the most, there is more craft and work that goes into making great whiskey pretty much than any other spirit. And I don't think, and people still have this perception of it being hooch or moonshine or whiskey or rough, when so many really talented and passionate whiskey makers go to extreme lengths with their time, with their passion, with their knowledge, mostly with their time. Whiskey takes a long time to get to where it is. You can do a 2 and a 4 years, but you see plenty of 10, 15, 20. That's a lot of investment of time. And there, this misperception that they distill their whiskey, put it in a rick house, and sit on their hands is not true. They're testing that barrel constantly, weekly, if not multiple times a week, to make sure it's picking up all the flavors from the barrel, and at the right rate, and at the right balance. So it truly is, of any spirit. Maybe like wine, so much goes into making fine wine. Whiskey was right there as far as the amount of craftsmanship and amount of knowledge and passion it takes to make a beautiful product. And it's not, and that perception is changed, and it's changed a lot over the last decade or so.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, kind of also just general awareness, right, of things like bourbon in particular. I always think, like, back when I started drinking bourbon because I couldn't drink Scotch. Like, a lot of the men in particular that I worked with in the mining industry, they all drank Scotch, and it was a little too strong for me at the time. So someone was like, "Oh, try bourbon." And I feel like back then nobody drank bourbon, and now it's like we went
When was that?
That would have been back in like 2009, 2010. I was
You're right on the cusp of the curve where things started turning around, right around the late it's 2006, 2008. The decline kind of stopped, and we started to see a slow resurgence. And then by the teens, like 2014, 16, bourbon had just rebounded. And now we're at, it's amazing to think, with bourbon, in 275 years we've been making bourbon in America. Right now is the peak popularity worldwide, both in the States and worldwide. And we're only 25 years or so removed from the absolute bottom.
Oh, that is, yeah.
Where distilleries were closing, sales were down, whiskey makers were cutting prices, doing anything to move their product. And perception was, like I said, it's a bottom shelf spirit. It's rough, and it's not refined. And then here we are, just 25 years later. So 270 years, you have the valley and the peak. It's incredible. So.
Well, and I guess I should back up too for our listeners. I wonder, could you kind of define what bourbon is compared to other whiskeys like Scotch or rye, and then what are the rules of bourbon? Because I was fascinated by that when you.
So there's I do several classes. I do classes every month in different subjects. The one class I repeat 2 or 3 times is Whiskey 101, which basically goes over the essentials. And it starts off with all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon.
Yeah.
Well, what do you hear that a lot? So what does that mean? So whiskey is it's real simple. It checks off 3 boxes. It's made from distilled from fermented grain, a spirit distilled from fermented grain. It's aged in any wood for any amount of time. It's bottled at least 80 proof. So that covers like the whole world.
Yeah.
Now, within that easy to qualify category, you have subcategories. You have bourbon, you have Irish whiskey, you have Japanese whiskey. With bourbon, and each subcategory has their own set of rules. So, and ours, believe it or not, bourbon has the most stringent, exacting standards. And in fact, our United States Congress in 1964 passed the Bourbon Act of 1964. And it set forth and declared that bourbon is our American spirit. It was created here. It's our gift to the spirit world. And then to be a bourbon, you must be at least 51% or more corn. So with whiskey, it could be any grain. With bourbon, it's got to be 51% or more corn. The other 49% could be any combination of grains. Must be aged in brand new, flame charred, virgin oak, American oak only. And so most of that comes from the Ozarks and Missouri, a lot from Minnesota, a lot more from the Pacific Northwest, but it's got to be American oak, brand new barrels, and it must be flame charred. And then the third major tenet would be that it must be made in the United States. So there's still this misperception that, oh no, it's Kentucky only. Kentucky is the heart. It's the soul of bourbon. It's the Mecca. 90% or more of your production still comes from Kentucky, but that number's dropping because every state in the United States is producing bourbon. It's hot right now. There's, dollars in it. So you think about it. You have High West in Utah. You have Widow Jane in Brooklyn. You got Garrison Brothers over in Texas. I can name a bourbon from every state, but it must be United States.
And
Puerto Rico and Guam.
Which I'm still I want to get a bourbon from Puerto Rico or Guam.
If somebody put out a bourbon from Guam, I would love to taste it.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know how good it would be, but and so you have the Bourbon Act in 1964. It's actually passed. That law was passed 4 days after my birthday. I was 4 days old then.
Oh gosh.
That was May 4th. I was born April 30th. But that's an actual law. And beyond those three tenets, there's a lot of physics and chemistry. It must be distilled no higher than 160. It must enter the barrel no higher than 125. It must be bottled at 80. There's a lot, some more technical things to the Bourbon Act. But I tell people, if you can remember the big three tenets, you understand what bourbon is. Rye must be 51% or more rye. Japanese whiskey must be made in Japan. They were playing, believe it or not, real loose with restrictions. They were importing whiskey from Scotland, sourcing whiskey from Scotland, bringing it to Japan, blending it and bottling it as Japanese whiskey. And they called out. Ireland and Scotland, both their governments have strict regulations for what their whiskey must be. So that's what distinguishes the subcategories. All have their own rules, but they all easily check off those three boxes to call themselves whiskey. Okay. So I don't know if that it's like all cardinals are birds, not all birds are cardinals.
Right. Well, and how do those different processes, I know because we've got a lot of scientists, a lot of engineers that listen to the podcast. Like, how does the aging process, for example, in different barrels impact how it tastes? Like, how does that, and including like the char, like how does all that kind of come in?
That's people are don't understand that well. The thing to understand is that your barrel, your oak, provides 100% of your color. 2/3 of your flavor or more, some people argue, comes from that oak. When you flame char, why do they flame char the inside of the barrel? What that does, those oak staves that comprise the barrel are loaded with chemicals, and specifically in America, our American oak is loaded with vanillins, which is basically vanilla. When you flame char that, it draws that to the surface or the red line of the barrel, and there's a lot of other chemicals in there. I don't have their names handy, but there's other chemicals that kind of get ignited when you flame char, get drawn to it, and those provide heavy caramel notes and unmistakable caramel and toffee. And so you've got these at the level, the red line we call it, where the flame char is, And then when you fill the barrel up with White Dog or White Lightning, the clear spirit, and those chemicals and vanillins and all that drops into the spirit. And so if 100% of your color and 2/3 of your flavor come from the oak barrel, half of all that comes the first 12 months that liquid is sitting in the barrel. And then the barrel continues to impart flavor year after year, but just at a much slower rate. But without that oak barrel, you're left with, if you've ever been to one, we carry Buffalo Trace. We have
That's my favorite. Yeah.
Buffalo Trace White Dog.
Yeah.
And I'll show people the bottle of White Dog. I wish it would have been a good problem. Then I show them the Buffalo Trace.
Yeah.
And they're amazed that this is the exact same liquid. Just this sat in an oak barrel for 6 to 8 years. And they're like, all that color, and I'll have them taste it. And when you taste the White Dog, which has little or no wood influence, tastes hot and sweet. You taste it tastes like corn, tastes like and it's a higher proof, and it's basically unrefined. The barrel refines things and adds more complexity and all those flavors that drop in from the chemicals in the wood that are brought out by the flame char.
Another thing we love in mining, refining stuff, right? Putting stuff through different processes.
Yeah.
Well, and how about location, Fitzy? Like how does where a bourbon or a whiskey is made impact how it tastes and how it drinks?
It's a lot of people. So beyond the barrel, what do you have left? You have your water source, your grains, and you have people are now really discovering how you can manipulate strains to really impact flavor. But start with the water. Kentuckians brag that theirs is the best bourbon, and one of the main reasons is all the creeks and rivers and waterways in Kentucky sit on heavy limestone deposits. And those limestone deposits, this is you love the iron. You don't want iron, and it actually adds minerals that contribute to the great flavor. So it's funny, Widow Jane, which you're familiar with in Brooklyn, New York, they source all their water. First of all, they're named after a small pocket, a small mine in the Hudson River, called the Widow Jane Mine, where there just happened to be a freakish little batch of limestone. So the owners of that, first of all, they're like, that'd be a great name for Widow Jane. And second of all, if this stuff's sitting on limestone, we want to use this water to when we start our whiskey company. And that's how it all started, because they sought after that limestone filtered water. So you got that, and then you got grains. I'll tell people, like, Pennsylvania rye does not taste slightly different from Kentucky rye. And then if you go all the way out, like the Pacific Northwest to like Oregon and Washington, you ever heard of Woodinville?
No.
They use Woodinville bourbon. A cool little company, although it's getting bigger. They source their grains from Willamette Valley.
Okay.
At least initially they did, which is Pinot Noir country. And the first time I tasted that, their rye had a really distinct flavor. Everything else was the same. The American flame charred oak, this and that, but that you could really taste the difference in the grain. So the terroir really can impact, be a big part of that other third of the flavor. But yeah, it's fascinating. You try a Woodinville rye and then try a Maryland or Pennsylvania rye, and you can really taste the difference. So the soil, the water, and then we could go talk forever about the yeast strain, but that's kind of a new wave. More of the guys from Wilderness Trail are really big into sweet mash and playing with yeast strains. Four Roses does 5 different yeast strains.
Wow.
They're really geeked out on it. They really get into that. Most distilleries either source buy their yeast strain for fermentation, or they have an in-house proprietary yeast strain. Four Roses has 5 in-house proprietary, and each one impacts and imparts. And so they combine those 5 with the 2 mash bills, one with a higher rye for a spicier note, one with a higher corn for a sweeter note, and then combine the 5 different yeast strains and come up with 10 different single barrel bourbons, all with a very distinct taste. So it's pretty fascinating, like how you can manipulate and how the grain, the terroir, the water, and the yeast can. That's your big three when you're talking outside of the barrel. What else can you do?
Yeah,
So,
that's so cool. Well, and I wonder for folks that are listening who maybe aren't bourbon or whiskey drinkers yet, what would you consider a good gateway bourbon or whiskey?
Intro. Well, it's funny. We call the old fashions kind of the gateway drug into
Okay.
whiskey.
Yeah.
Once you get past that, then definitely bourbon, because bourbon with the high corn content is going to think about your grains. Your corn is sweet, your rye is spicy. Wheat tends to be smooth and easy and allow the other grains to shine. It's the Veda and malted barley. In the United States, we don't use a lot of malted barley, but when it's used at 10% or higher rate, it lends a toastiness, maltiness to the spirit. But so for beginners, you're probably looking for something with a lot of corn. Everybody loves sweet. So there's a Japanese whiskey called Nika coffee grain. There's no coffee in it. It's named after a man named Aeneas Coffee, who invented the column still, which revolutionized. But when I first tasted it, I didn't know that. I swore I tasted a coffee note, which is, I still do. But that is 95% corn, 5% barley. So it's just super easy and smooth. Basil Hayden makes a toast, which is a secondary maturation. So they put it in the second barrel, which refines it and smooths it. And that's made with 36% brown rice. And it has this creamy, easy, it's 80 proof. So it's the minimum. That's a great beginner one, or I call it entry level. Yeah. In Scotland, you were talking about how Scotch was too harsh for you. You should come to my next class. It's February 15th. And it's demystifying Scotch, understanding the 6 regions of whiskey regions of Scotland. And they're each so unique and different. And like the Lowlands, he's getting into the first time, I recommend an Alcantoshan. Those are super easy drinking. Glenfiddich 12 from Speyside is often called like the intro to Scotch. So if you want to start with Scotch, start there. But if you want to start with just whiskey in general, your Basil Hayden toast, your the Nika coffee grain. There's a Kentucky bourbon called I.W. Harper, which is 15 years old. It's 86 proof. It's kind of like when I drop this on people, and if they make a face with this stuff, I'm like, I don't think I can help you. Thanks for playing. Let's get you a Pinot Grigio. Let's just have some fun here. There's plenty, and I recommend for people to just have an open mind and try some different things. But like those would be 3. Oh, don't forget Irish whiskey. The Irish will say that their whiskey, rightfully, is among the easiest drinking whiskey in the world, and so. For there, we love Jameson is easy, but if you want something a little even smoother, more refined, creamy and delicious, the Redbreast 12.
Okay.
And these are all bottles I try to keep in my house at all times, just because they're so delicious, so easy drinking. If I give somebody a Redbreast 12 and they're like, ugh, I'm like, okay.
It's not going to be for you then. Yeah.
No, because it does not get any smoother and silky and creamy and delicious than that. In my opinion,
like you said, it's Pinot Grigio time. If that doesn't work,
that's fine, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's make you a bad person.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not for everybody, but I'm batting about 500 with people who don't think they like whiskey, and I introduce them to certain whiskeys, and they're like, "Huh, wow, what else you got?" And get them to go to a second and a third. So I really enjoy that. It's one of the favorite parts of my job when I can turn people around and turn them on to how beautiful whiskey could be. If anybody's not familiar with barrel, considered by most of the bloggers and the reviewers and Whiskey Advocate and all but they're really dedicated to whiskey. It's kind of consensus that those guys at Barrelcraft are making, they're the heads above. They're the best blenders in the country. So I'm excited to be doing my whiskey, Old Fitzpatrick's famous 4-grain, under their roof with Joe's help and his great team. So look forward to that. I'll keep you posted.
Look forward to having you back on to talk more about that.
I would love that.
Awesome. Well, we will be sure to include, for everybody listening, we'll put in the show notes and on social media and everything, the link to Warren, where you can go and have a tasting with Fitzy, and also his class that's coming up. As he said, he does a bunch of really cool classes. So for all of my mining peeps and all our listeners, if you're in South Florida, be sure to look up Fitzy and Warren. And thank you so much, Fitzy, for jumping on.
And that's our introduction to the On the Rocks Masterclass series. I hope you all really enjoyed it. A huge thank you to Fitzy for sharing his expertise with us. And hey, if any bourbon brands are listening, Emily is still waiting for that sponsorship she has been manifesting since episode 1. In the meantime, we'd love to hear about your favorite spirits, especially what you're sipping while listening to the show. While this episode was a fun nod to our show's signature style, our upcoming masterclasses will dive deep into crucial mining and geoscience topics, from exploration techniques to sustainability practices and everything in between. The goal of these masterclasses is to break down complex topics into approachable, actionable lessons, all while maintaining that casual conversation style you've come to expect from On the Rocks. Are you an industry expert with knowledge to share? We would love to hear from you. Or if your company would like to sponsor an episode of our masterclass series, reach out to us at media@prospectorportal.com. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to digging deeper into mining topics in our upcoming episodes. Remember to like, subscribe, follow us on social media, and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.